happening, people? This is Rohit here, and in this podcast episode, I'm going to discuss my culture shocks as an international student in the US. So, let's get started. Every single thing that I'm going to say is just based on my own opinion and perspective, and not to be taken as every single person's perspective. And this is what I have faced, and that's what I'm going to share in this podcast episode. So, the first one is very unique, and I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but after coming here, I realized that this is actually a big thing. A lot of colleges and universities here do not have a actual physical boundary. And just to make this point clear, where I come from in India, every single university, see, some are, yes, they're outside the city, that's fine, but you actually have a boundary, right? So you have the fence to say this is, that property ends there. And where I graduated from, Christ University, we have a front gate and a back gate, and every single thing inside is the actual university. But after coming here, and mine is a public university, maybe because of that, that's what I thought. But at the same time, when even NYU is there, there are no boundaries. Like, people can go through every single building, like wherever there are roads, people can just use it and use their cars and go through it. And that's something which I found as very interesting, because on the first day when my uncle was dropping me at my university and he asked me which building, I'm like, how does it matter? Like, just drop me at the entrance. That's what I did not say that, but that's what I had in mind. But later I was like, okay, it makes sense why he's asking, so I just gave the address. And after going there, that's where I realized that okay, it's just buildings here and there within a community, and that's just college. And 2 to 3 blocks, 2 to 3 sections, that's university. And that was my first experience, and that's where I realized that there's no actual set boundaries. Yes, when you look at maps, it will say so and so college, but there are also other buildings in between. It can be so in different permutation combinations. Sometimes it can be community based organizations, sometimes it's residences, people are actually living around there. It's just so beautiful and so interesting. And the other thing which I realized when it comes to colleges is that every single person, and when I talk to them, when I ask them regarding colleges, each one, yes, I hear a lot about okay, this course or that course, what they want to study. And also I realize one of the factors which people are using, not everyone, but people are using this factor, is to actually decide what kind of landscape that they want to experience around the college. Some people say, I want to be in a city, I want to be in suburbs, I want to be in a college town, and these are few options. For example, Princeton University is a college town because the town itself is named Princeton, and its main significance is Princeton University. But city life means you have NYU, so you get to experience New York City itself. And for other college town or other just suburbs, it's so many other colleges. When you look at other huge big colleges, they are all in suburb kind of situation, like Penn State. And that's one thing which I found was very interesting, because as an Indian, I would do it based on course or what I really want to study, and other people are they're doing based on so many other factors, because they know that all this 4 years what they're going to spend here as during the undergrad bachelor's is going to be special. And what makes this experience more memorable is how they want to study and where they want to study, and that's one of the important factors. And talking about suburbs, one of the things which I realized right when I came to the US was my experience in the something called suburban area, because I am from the city, so I'm used to being in the city. And for me, my idea and my perspective was just city or rural life in India. That's how I thought about it. It's just my knowledge at that point of time. But after coming here, I realized that there's so many different landscapes. There's suburbs, there's city, and then there's countryside kind of thing. There's coastal. Yes, there's so many other countries which has it, but at the same time, US is so vast, and the kind of people's mentality towards suburbs. And when I first came to suburbs, I realized there's just so much space. It's just spaced out, and houses are like movie sets. You don't know if people are there inside or not, and that's something which I found is really interesting. And even malls, where I come from, it's city life, and I think it's still the same in India as well. When you look at mall, as an Indian, what I think about is like a big square building or different big rectangle building. Whatever shape building is, it has a high rise, at least 3 to 4 floors. That's how I look at malls, at least because of my experiences in different cities. But after coming here, especially in suburbs, I realized that malls are a lot more spread out. It's just 1 or 2 floors, and here ground floor itself is called first floor. First floor for me, it's like here it's second floor, so it's first floor and second floor. Where I come from, it's ground floor and first floor, and it's just that. and it's just so spaced out. You realize how big every single mall is and how each one is just spaced. You realize how vast this country is after coming here, and that itself is like slight culture shock. When I say culture shock, it also has to do with each one's perspective, because I know a lot about US even before coming here. I know about tissue paper culture, I know about so many other aspects, but that's not something which I would call like culture shock for me. What all I'm saying till now in this as a list is what is culture shock for me, so I just want to put it out there. So having that suburb mindset, having this suburb thing itself was very interesting for me. And the people in suburb, people how they drive in suburbs was interesting. People in the city, their mindset or how the hustle culture is, that's also very interesting. And I also realized that a lot of people want to, where I come from in India, a lot of people in the rural, yes, some people are there who want to stay there, but there are also some people with the mindset that they want to come to the city to stay and live there. But here I realize that people in this who live in the suburbs, they are actually rich. And when they want to come, I mean, again, I'm not trying to generalize, but at the same time they go to the city for work, and then they live in suburbs because of the space and because of what they want to give their experience. And school system, I heard, in the suburbs are good, and there's so many stereotypes, norms, cultural norms, but it is what it is. That's something which I personally found as very interesting. And the other interesting aspect of what I've experienced so far is not all states have like amazing food. And I'm saying this again, I might let there might be a lot of criticism, but where I come from, I'm from the tri-state area. And when I went and visited other states, and based on my experiences of what I talked to people who have traveled a lot as well, because of my exposure in tri-state area and what all I have experienced, because you get literally every single thing, because I'm staying in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania area, and this like big hub, the other big hub is in the west. But being in this kind of mindset and what all I experienced here makes it more interesting. Oh, some disturbance is coming back to the states. I was just discussing and thinking about how each state is perceived, as well as each state has its own opinion when it comes to politics and so many other aspects. And that's something which I have never thought from India's point of view, because again the culture is very different. Each state here, the way how they think of it in based on political lens, as well as each person's people's ideologies, people's accents. And that's something I never thought about, because I knew I thought I knew about US, and after coming here I'm experiencing so many different new things. And that's my culture exposure, and that also ties down to the next point which I was going to talk about. But each state's lens, after coming here you realize how each person thinks of each state, and that's something like surprise. And each state has their own norms and stereotypes, which are true, which might not be true, which might be fake, which is just said for fun. But that's something which I found as a culture shock and very interesting according to me. And the next point is about how each one thinks of different races, and it's a good thing as well as bad thing because of the norms and stereotypes. But this is just my opinion and perspective, and I'll also clarify where I come from. Because in the as an Indian, I've been exposed to the US through movies and all that, but I don't think a lot of movies touches upon a lot of movies just touch upon white people, and that's the dominant culture in a way, somewhat dominant culture. But at the same time, yes, now we are seeing people of color, black people being exposed on the media. There's a lot more exposure of the black people in the media. That's what I meant. And after coming here, you also realize the kind of norms and all that, but you also realize there's other races, Hispanic culture, Latin American culture. So all those kind of people is what makes US what is US in the first place. And that exposure, the Latin American music is something which I never heard when I was in India, but after coming here I started listening to it. I realized how huge it actually is, and having those kind of people around me. And in my way, it also, in my case, it made it more special because of my culture exposure through roommates. This is something, it's more like destiny. I did not plan it, but out of my four roommates, including me, I was the Indian. I had a white roommate, I had a black roommate, and I also had his Hispanic roommate. So that exposure itself made it more special, and that's something I would feel is unique in my case. I know there are few other people who had this kind of experience, but I realize in my case it's special because a lot of other international students choose to live only with Indians, and in my case it was a bit different. And what I learned by living through with people from other races, it's just special, and each one's stereotypes, each one's norms, and some similarities, some differences, and that's just very special in my case. And apart from that, few small aspects which I want to discuss is holding the door out for the next person. That's another social experiment in itself, because yes, you're holding out. If the other person realizes that they are holding the door for them, they'll try to rush, and then that's something I did not actually experience in India. Yes, here and there we used to do it, but it's not like an actual norm that we did it. As well as asking other person how are you doing, and that's just a way of greeting. And these days I've reached a point where I just say good, thank you. And for me, I really want to ask it with a meaning, and yes, I do that. So that's just my opinion, and that's few small aspects. And the other thing which I noticed was when I took the train, actually that was very interesting, because I took the Amtrak train and I realized that there's only class. There's no actual seat numbers, because in India you actually get the seat numbers for every single train you take. But here there's no actual seat numbers, and that's something which I found was really interesting for me. And the last thing that I want to cover in this podcast episode, and if there are other ones, I can make so many different series out of this, and this is not something which I planned about. But the last one is the mindset regarding part time work or just work in general, and each one how much they're passionate about what they really do. Yes, here and there might be different opinions, but I want to touch upon part time work in general, because as a student, international student, yes, I have worked on campus, but back in India, not a lot of people just like that work on the side, or just to make each one situation again is different. But I haven't been exposed to a lot of people who are working part time apart from schooling. Like with schooling, they're balancing this as well, and this is something which I find interesting, because here a lot of people do that. There's no stigma there. At the same time, there's no extra pride as well, but it's just what keeps people humble. And every single person that I have met in my experience so far is super nice, and they realize that part-time work is still work, and sometimes that's how people pay their bills. That's what I did in my case. And back home, even the thought of something like this might be a slight stigma for some people, and that's what I have experienced. This is just my experience, but as of now, these are the kind of small culture shocks that I have felt till now. But if there's any more, I'll definitely make another separate podcast episode about it. Thank you all for watching. See you all in another one. Till then, bye from me.